So today I want to talk about a process that I think that inhibits most people's ability to actually drive the change in their life that they're seeking to instill. And the process I want to describe is a way of rewiring something that you think about. And if we go through this rewiring process, I just think you'll get quite a differential result. So a lot of you, for example, think about principles, let's call them principles, systems such as I'm going to wake up early, I'm going to start watching YouTube tutorials at the weekend. And these are the new, for example, habits that I want to form. And the principle that sits beneath the habit is that I want to be a better person. And the value that I ascribe to that is self-development. And I do that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got all of these, let's call them sets of ideas that form altogether a process. Okay. And of course, one of the challenges that we all have is, and we've discussed it before, is the intermittent application of these processes that we've described. So that's why I was curious to ask about, for example, the times that people are waking up. And what we all often do is that we attempt something and then we are met with neutral results. And that might be a combination of environmental pressure or inertia, resistance to change. And the end product of it is that we're not too much further from where we started, or we're back right where we started a week later, and we're back to eating the ice creams. We're back to not giving up sugar. We're back to not getting to the gym. And one of the things that I think it's important to rewire in your brain is to think of all of these principles as muscles rather than systems. And if you begin to understand then the willpower, which we often talk about, depletes each day. So you have a reserve that you begin with, which is why, for example, yesterday at the end of my day, when my willpower was deleted or depleted, and some of my systems, Daniela being here, so maybe I think we're watching New Girl at the moment, reruns on Disney. She enjoys it. I enjoy it. It's funny. Schmidt is amazing. But she was away on holiday. And as a consequence, my willpower being depleted at the end of the day, Daniela being away in Mykonos on holiday, led me to binge watching nonsense from 9 p.m. because also it'd been a whole week where I'd not watched TV. Okay. So what happens is that as a consequence of things like that, we beat ourselves up and we can then often typically revert to form. Revert to form meaning that, okay, maybe, for example, in 3 days from now, rather than seven, I'll start watching TV because I'm about to enter the valley of Daniela being absent. So my evenings are literally empty. So it's no New Girl, no nothing. So we often go through different versions of these problems. And if you begin to think of all of these areas as muscles that require conditioning, that require development, it should begin to change the way that you approach these areas. Because my not watching TV anymore is a muscle that I need to develop. It's something that I need to train myself to do. And inherently, that training isn't a linear process. And I think that what sometimes happens is that one of the other areas that we speak about is this concept of, for example, urgency, for those of you who are part of that call. So urgency isn't a principle, it's a muscle. You need to build that muscle. And if you see it as a muscle and you realize it's a muscle that you've barely trained in your life, then that muscle is going to be weak to begin with. And your best effort is going to be, yep, this is urgent. And urgency for you might then translate into doing it 2 hours later. Whereas urgency for someone else was saying, oh, it's urgent. I'm going to get it done right now. And right now will mean literally, I'm going to stop, put you on mute, and make the call for the person who I need to have the conversation with. So that's where, again, that whole, if something takes less than 2 minutes, do it right now. The 2 minute rule. For those of you who don't know it, 80% of tasks that involve communication or updating people takes less than 2 minutes. And what happens is that because we haven't trained our muscle to develop that ability to literally do it within 2 minutes, that it means it often ends up practically taking 10 minutes because you'll say, yeah, it'll take 2 minutes, but I need 20 minutes to mentally prepare myself and gather my notes. And then often the outcome isn't that different. So if you begin to look at all of these areas of your life, so the foundations that most of us hear about, habit formation, let's call it, which is I'm going to wake up early, I'm going to improve myself. I'm going to develop my knowledge. I'm going to read. I'm going to exercise more. These are the classic things. And I'm going to improve my diet. And these will be probably to a degree the buckets. Again, if we think about the health, wealth, self, and everyone else, we've got health, wealth, and self there. Everyone else is probably slightly separate in this context, but they're all muscles that need development and you all are in a severe state of atrophy. So those muscles require time to develop the necessary level of conditioning to get the result that you're looking for. So it's useful to think about that. And I think that what we forget sometimes with thinking that, okay, living, having a better diet is the principle, but the practice of it is the muscle that I need to train. So the practice of it is, Deepak, I really want to be healthier. And I'd say, okay, great. You got to reduce the amounts of sugar that you have in your diet. Because if you're drinking Cokes every day, if you're having cookies, if you're having chocolate, that's one of the slow, insidious killers. So the muscle that you need to build is to, of course, rewire. You need to train that muscle, and you have to appreciate your muscle's super fucking weak because you smash cookies at your desk all day. So you need to you need to develop the muscle. So I think that as you go about your day and you think about the habits that you're trying to instill, think of them as muscles. And the stronger that muscle becomes, the better your ability to instill some of the habits and systems that you speak of. Which is why, depending upon the strength and development of your muscle, you'll see some people who have a really strong muscle when it comes to skill acquisition can start here from a knowledge standpoint and then push past the person with more knowledge because the muscle that they've optimized is the acquisition of new skill. Does that make sense? Which is why people talk about grittiness as being so important, which is why we try and look for grit and resilience as an indicator of someone's potential for success, because that tends to carry over into other areas because you work on your ability to resist temptation, to experience discomfort, which is why also for some of you who I've spoken about, I'm a great believer of the importance of doing something physically hard every day because it helps develop. Because when you go through some level of physical, let's say, discomfort, you experience emotional and mental pain. Because if any of you have heard of it, there's this whole concept of the 40% rule. And some people say it's less than that we go through almost all of our lives living up to a maximum of 40% of our actual cognitive and physical ability. Because, of course, if you think about it, your body, again, the muscle and the body, the muscle that you have here is inbuilt and it's strong. The body has, of course, lots of warning systems that alert you ahead of time that you're going into a space that you've not gone to before, which is why people get a stitch when they run, which is why people maybe, for example, experience headaches when you try and focus for longer than you focused before. But of course, we're resilient mammals and we're able to push well in excess of that, which is why records still continue to be broken because people are still exploring the limits of human potential. That's why, to Johnny's point, someone did a 100-kilometer run in 6 hours something. People are at a stage where they're able to push past their potential. So all of these things that we've been discussing when it comes to bettering yourself, you guys are developing the very, very atrophied weak muscle of self-development. It's a journey, and you need to build that muscle in order to develop and instill all of these habits that we've been speaking of. And that process takes time, and it's not linear, and there'll be intermittent setbacks. And it's also why I champion the importance, and now I move to Temi in the group, of tracking progress in a data-driven way, because it's very easy in those moments to not be cognizant to the progress that you've actually made. But when you have the data in front of you, you can see, okay, wow, I used to manage 4 clients, now I manage 8. The diversity of clients I now manage has increased significantly. The amount of positive feedback that I track on a weekly basis, where someone explicitly says, well done, has increased by 3x. Of course, the inverse happens as well, is that people do really well one week, and then because they're not tracking, they think they've done a lot better overall than they're actually doing. So think of principles and habits and system, all of these things as muscles, okay? And then you need to track that's why it's important to track progress alongside it, because then you can see how you're developing that muscle over time. And the challenge, and now I, for example, moved to Shania, she's not here, but one of the things that we spoke about was we were talking about diet, and I said, the classic killer for most people when it comes to challenging or managing their diet is managing sugar intake, processed sugar. Okay, it's no surprise to anyone. But if you've lived in an environment, and this is often a challenge of academia and some multiple jobs, um, not here, and that's also part of the challenge of being at Pearl Lemon, is that you have a very weak, proactive, intentional muscle because most people are used to being given stuff that's very rigid, very structured, been shown exactly what to do. So your reliance upon your own initiative is often people prefer to not rely on their initiative because that's the way that we've been raised mostly. So the key I want you to understand is that all of these things are muscles. The muscles require development. The muscles require development over time. You've not had huge room in your life to develop it. And if you have developed it, it's often been unconscious development because you self or you decide to read books in the morning. But what I'm, of course, have been doing for the last couple of weeks is trying to raise significantly your level of awareness and to really invest or recruit a lot of your mental energy into building out all of these muscles because those muscles will then determine your trajectory at Pearl Lemon. So he who, for example, has the most level of focus as well as ability to acquire new skills can become. There's no reason, for example, why. Let's just take, for example, James. James is here. James, let's say you really work hard on the skill of focus as well as skill development. There's no reason, for example, why within 2 weeks you couldn't know more about Ahrefs, which is an SEO tool, than anyone else in this room. And that would put you at a distinct competitive advantage when it comes to saying, well, I'm not an SEO expert, but the volume of knowledge that I've required. But what sits underneath that is actually your muscle of focus and to deal with discomfort, which is why, again, I revert back to the physical discomfort daily. It's quite a good proxy for developing that muscle. Does that make sense, guys? Well, I'm going with this. There's this degree of transferability, and it gives you more ultimately systems to recruit from in the development of a particular muscle that you're trying to build. Okay, and that's where they talk about compound exercises and why they say that there's basically 4 compound exercises that can build musculature development in the gym. You bench press, you deadlift, you ultimately do overhand press, and you squat. You do those 4 exercises and you become really strong. And then everything else around that is features and functions of individual muscle systems. So then when you correlate that across to life, the muscles that you want to train most aggressively is your ability to focus, your ability to experience continuous discomfort. And remember, they're muscles, which is why you need to do them on a continuous basis. And that's, I think, where I think sometimes people don't necessarily appreciate that. So where, for example, let's say you want to take on a new challenge of learning something, then you need to develop your ability to focus. And that's quite invariably a difficult thing to do. It's a struggle that I'm having. And again, it's why they're muscles. I would like to learn Italian, and it's slow and it's a struggle. And I need to, in the time that I have allotted to me, increase significantly my levels of focus. And that's a challenge that I'm working through alongside the other things that I'm working through, which is learn Italian, stop watching TV, consistently wake up at 4:30, improve my diet. There's things that I'm systematically trying to work upon. But what sits at the foundation of it is that I have spent some years building the muscles that are required to instill new habits in my life, which is where I'm able to try at a potentially oftentimes more rapid clip instill these habits because I've been trying to work upon my muscle of focus and discipline for a long time. And I'm trying to now take it to the next level. And if you build your muscles and not principles and not habits, then you'll see that when you then apply new habit formation to something that's already a well-developed muscle, the speed at which you'll be able to implement or involve that in your day-to-day life will be much better. So again, it's that, the discipline to do it on a daily basis is uncomfortable, but there's so much fucking value in working on it and seeing it as a muscle and tracking it because then you can truly understand where your progress is and if you're not measuring it, it's very difficult to manage it. It's why gamification works so well in general. When you look at software, I use Duolingo and it passively tracks my progress for me. So having passive systems to help you as well. One of the things we talk about with Charles, for example, in web development, he is building a passive way for me to measure the specific number of changes that the SEO team make on the sites. So I can passively determine who is doing the most implementation when it comes to our work on the WordPress dashboard. So where and when you can use systems to support you. It took me too long. Use tools to help the acceleration of the development of that muscle. That's what I guess I'm trying to communicate. And it took me, for example, far too long to use Garmin. It's so crazy. But that was a catalyst in the development of my muscle of improving my ability as a runner, my cardiovascular systems, my basic, my the strengths in my quadriceps, the deep conditioning required to run hills every day, because I had a passive system, Garmin, that was able to measure every single one of my runs, all of the elevation gain, my resting heart rate, and to track it in an automated way. So as you think about these muscles, build passive systems to support your muscle development. So in childhood, they talk about this concept of scaffolding, which Vygotsky talks about. And scaffolding is the process that as a baby moves into being an infant, toddler, that there's systems that are around them that slowly fall away over time, which is, of course, using a baby stroller and then a kid learning to ride a bike on with stabilizers before they begin to learn on their own. So when you embark on building your muscle, also pay mind to you're trying to go from 0 to 100, which is doable, but it involves pain. So going from 0 to 1 is often easier, but build systems to support you in the development of that muscle, which is why I think someone, Faizan, maybe was asking me about the power. Like, what do you do to wake up early specifically? And I'll say, well, I have several systems. One, I have a watch on my wrist that vibrates. It doesn't make sounds because that would wake Daniela up. But then two, I have an actual analog clock in another room that will fucking wake Daniela up if I don't turn it off. And she will go mental. So I have a system that supports my waking up early. And I didn't wake up today because she was away. So I turned the damn thing off because she was going away. And then I woke up late. So do you see how you can build systems to support the accelerated development of that muscle? So think deeply about the systems to help build the muscles and be kind in the development of it because all of yours are atrophied. So you can develop a whole series of systems to help accelerate things, which is why accountability is important, why structures and all of the things around you and realize that what you're trying to develop is that muscle of I want my focus muscle to be really, really strong. I want my muscle to deal with discomfort to be really, really strong because it carries over into different spaces. And that's why there's such a huge crossover, by the way. Another example with there's a disproportionate amount of, I think, like tech companies or Fortune 500 companies, like a significantly huge amount the highest rate in the world comes out of Israel. So there's lots of people because they're a country that was born into war because of Palestine and Hamas and the Gaza Strip. A lot of people leave the military and they take these series of muscles that they built, discipline, focus, ability to perform under pressure, and they go and build tech companies and they do really, really, really well at it. So that's why there's such a crossover between discomfort and success, if that makes sense, which is also why, again, most billionaires in the world categorically are self-made because being relying upon oneself requires the ability to deal with discomfort and challenges. So think of all of these things as muscles, build systems to support your muscle development, and then lean into the development of those muscles. Know that it will take time. And if you want to accelerate the time, or rather minimize the time, then build in as many systems to support your development as possible, which is where then they talk about environment. And now we go back to the everyone else thing. Will, for example, people that have bad habits around you support you in the development of your muscle? And if they don't, you're probably in the wrong room. So all of these things are muscles. Work on building these muscles, have systems to support your muscle development, and it will carry over into many other areas of your life. So that's why also it's worth reading books on, of course, habit formation and fundamentally the building of how to learn. But what sits underneath that is the development of resilience, because that's the muscle that will dictate how much you take in from the information you get exposure to. You need to have mental toughness to do the work that's required. So the foundational thing that sits underneath it all is mental toughness. Another one person I'm a fanboy of, Cristiano Ronaldo. And they say, why do you think you have been, the most successful footballer by many, many accounts over such an extended period of time? Do you think you have some kind of preternatural talent? And he says, it's my mind. He says, it's in here. It's not out there, which you'll see across all of the great people. They say the same, a different version of the same thing. And all of you have that ability within you. So build the muscles on a daily, continuous, never-ending basis that will contribute towards your success.